George Lucas wanted to do Flash Gordon at a time before he was George Lucas, and he couldn't afford the rights. So he invented his own version of Flash Gordon and called it Star Wars. And the success of Star Wars induced Dino, who did have enough money to buy the rights, to think, well, I'm going to do Flash Gordon. He went to Fellini first, and Federico said, oh, Dino, of course, and then disappeared. And he would, and then it turned into, as I say, a British production. I met Nick Roeg years before Flash Gordon, and we always wanted to work together. I had a big picture one year called Into the Dragon, and he had a big picture that year called Don't Look Now. And one of the things you do with your success is you tell your agent who you want to meet. And that was how I got introduced to Nick. I used the cachet of my success, and we hit it off immediately. And he was the coolest dude on the planet at that moment. He really was. And he asked me to rewrite The Man Who Fell to Earth. I said, it's a big job, I think that, I'd want to change it. He said, I don't want to change it. I just want you to make it more American, put in some slang. When the limousine driver comes, he says, I'm here to collect so-and-so. What do you say in America? Well, you pick them up. I'm here to pick them up. He says, that's what I want. That's all I want. And I said, no, Nick, you want an American? And I was a really arrogant, smart-ass screenwriter, self-defense in Hollywood. So I was so arrogant that I said, okay, well, American. I would start with a title page. We call it The Man Who Fell to Earth. Change that. Change it to what? I said, Splat. He says, all right, we'll drink. And then the next year, a couple years later, he called me from London. He was in Claridge's. He says, I'm here with Dino, and how about we write a movie for him? And I said, hey, just tell me where and when. Oh, what's the movie? He says, it's Flash Gordon.
I think he was quite interested in expanding his feelings about space. What I think he didn't get so much was science fiction in terms of cartoon science fiction, comic strip science fiction. But I can see why he wanted to do it, because of the whole expanse of the possibilities of the film.
He was the last great director from the 60s, from that era, who hadn't done a Hollywood picture. And that was Nick's impetus. I wanted to be arty-farty, with him in London, and he was going the other way. He wanted to make a Hollywood picture.
I think he saw in Flash Gordon something that he could maybe change from the normal space movie. It was, obviously one of the first sort of comic cuts type of films. And I think Nick was interested in putting his particular stamp on it.
Then we had to figure out why we were doing this, because it's a comic book, And in the Sunset Marquis Hotel, in Nick's room, there are 2 twin beds. Between the twin beds is a pile of comic books, Flash Gordon comic books, 3 feet high. Nicolas Roeg is lying on one bed. Michael Allen is lying on the other bed. And we are reading these comics, trying to figure out what to do with this story. Throwing the comic books across the room to each other and laughing and talking about what are we going to do with this? And from there, epiphanies ensued. And it turned into, we realized that it was Adam and Eve being chased by a jealous God across the universe, right? Because Flash Gordon was the most popular comic strip in the 30s, during the Depression, when nothing was working. Science was supposed to change the world, and not even science could alleviate the Depression. It took politics, it took Roosevelt, it took all kinds of, it took World War II, really. So science was not working. God was a villain, because how could he let this happen? And this is how our story evolved into, it became like a biblical epic. And in our script, Ming is depopulating the universe, world by world. And this was going to be really sexy, because he would wipe out whole worlds, except for the one woman that he could choose of the whole population. And then he would repopulate that world in his image with her. So this is why he was after Dale Arden, because she was the woman that he had chosen to repopulate Earth with. I mean, I know what it sounds like, but it was so grand and so huge. And our script was, what made it serious is the fact that it's the humanity of the humans when it confronts all this evil that triumphs and brings out the best in the aliens, you know, the tree men and all the subject population of Ming the Merciless, master of the universe. And they all turn against Ming and become friends with the two human beings. It's the humanity that drives the story. Yeah.
I got the impression from the feedback I was getting at the time that Dino was a little concerned about the direction Nick was taking the movie.
He would say things like, we need more jokes. If we can't laugh, we might as well suicide ourselves. Nick, this is too serious, right? And that was the beginning of the hint of what was to come. Yeah.
I think the problem was that Dino wanted a full-on cartoon and Nick wanted this social explanation of dystopian living and the relationships of people.
At that time, it was before big extravaganza productions. And the first draft was budgeted at $25 million, and Dino hit the roof, and we had to rewrite for the budget. So we cut out the whole second act, where Dale is kidnapped into another kingdom, you know, and Flash has to go rescue her and all. We had to cut that and rewrite for the budget.
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult to understand the dynamics between Dino and Nick. You know, Dino was a big producer. He'd done an awful lot of films. He obviously liked Nick, or he wouldn't have employed him in the first place.
He always told me, whenever we're with Dino, just be quiet, because he would hold for, you know, he was the auteur. And I can tell you this was his integrity. If you worked for Dino, for Nick, you were in his army, and he defended you to the death because you represented his authority over his own project. In the movie business, somebody gives you a problem and they say, do you want to make this movie or not? You do it my way or your way. And Nick never made him. That was why his movies didn't make as many movies as maybe he should have or could have. But Nick never backed down. Nick was an artist. Dino was intimidated by Nick. And his criticism of Nick was that he was a genius, and he didn't want a genius. Right? He wanted somebody who, you know, like John Huston, you know, direct the Bible, a great director, but you know, knows how to play the game.
He had a super office in Park Lane, and it was the classic intimidatory office. His office with the big windows facing onto Park Lane, and he had his desk slightly higher than the floor, right in this big bay window with the light behind him. And you came in, and then there was nothing, just this dark floor, and him up there with the light behind him. And you thought, oh my God, what have I gone to?
Dino was a major guy. He was, you know, I mean, it was fun, because all of a sudden, let me put it this way, okay? When you hang around Hollywood, you meet all kinds of people. Frank Lloyd Wright said that the North American continent is tilted and everything loose slides to LA. And everybody goes out there to make themselves up, to invent themselves as a screenwriter or you know, it's a one-horse movie town. But he could talk to you and he knew what you wanted. And that was his genius. He could read people. I said, what do you think is a successful person, Dino? He says, you find what you can do best and don't do anything else. I'm hiring you to write the script. I'm hiring somebody else to sweep the floor. Except he couldn't live by that. He had to sweep the floor. He had to write, you know, he had to meddle in everything. And he played people against each other. Nick was the most loyal, honest, person of integrity that I ever worked with, and he became a mentor, a colleague, a brother, a father, an uncle, my best friend. But because we always told each other the truth, and our favorite game was listen to what Dino did, right? That he doesn't want you to know about, because he would play us against each other.
I just went for an interview, and we simply talked about what I'd done. It was really talked nothing about the film. It was obviously just sizing me up. And I know that on the same day he interviewed Jim Atchison, another costume designer, and I think he couldn't decide, and we both got employed as joint costume designers, which is very unusual. It was a slight sort of competition. We had an office in the old farmhouse at Pinewood Studios, and we just went in there the first morning, looked at all these blank sheets of paper, looked at each other, and talked for about 10 minutes and started drawing, and we never stopped. I mean, by the time we'd finished, by the time we were sacked, we had the whole walls covered with drawings. It was quite an interesting time. He wanted to see drawings. He was very interested. He didn't want just talk, he wanted to see drawings. So almost the first thing I did was to buy the comic strip book, the Alex Raymond comic strip. We looked a bit at those together, and I said, I love the movement, the fantastic movement and strength of movement they've got in them, but actually if you break them down and just put them onto sheets of paper, they're very bland. And he agreed. And they are fantastic drawings, but as characters, you get them out of the drawing, they wasn't right. We had to expand on that. And I did use a lot of Alex Raymond's work, looking at it, as a basis, but developing on it, making it much more, I think, full of character rather than just strength.
The storyline was ours, but what we used from the comic book were the kingdoms, and we took the various kings, like Baron and the Tree Man and the Lion Man, and we used all of that because it was such a great visual. One world had all these different terrains and different characters, different species of aliens, and they were at war with each other.
I wanted to make something that wasn't as bland as it appeared in the comic strip, and we were obviously going to the script, I felt, and certainly Nick Roeg felt, was looking at aliens being Flash Gordon and that lot coming into pretty dystopian societies, and that we felt needed to be emphasised. The thing about Flash was that you see him as a New Yorker, as an American, and you then see him working and running in an alien society. So we needed development of his clothes through that. And the most important thing was to make him look strong and sexy and capable. And that actually is what comes out in Mike Hodges' film too. But I know that Nick was very keen that we got a big contrast between the nice people and the nasty people. And I think that shows it in what we were doing for Dale. I was looking at the drawings and I was astonished at how glamorous we were trying to make her. And that kind of surprises me now. Ming just had to be obviously he was a predator, total predator. And actually I'm going to keep saying Alex Raymond did sort of show that. He had him always, it's a very spiky look. And I liked that and tried to develop that. And everything that I was trying to present, because I was doing the Ming drawings, was very sharp. I actually looked at some pictures of praying mantises and then developed that into a human form. Obviously there was very much a sort of trying to make a sort of fascist feel, and I think you will see that comes over. It's a sort of a Soviet fascism that we were putting there, and there's some of Jim's drawings, some of my drawings, and we've actually photocopied them, mounted them, put them together and made a montage of them, and there's a couple of things I've got in my portfolio that show that.
The Lion Man, he's a real character in the Flash Gordon comics.
I've got a nice drawing in there, but basically I stole it from, there's one little clip in Alex Raymond where he did a Lion Man drawing, which was lovely, and we just worked on that, developed it. What
he was really useful for was, he's like Caliban in The Tempest. He's half sentient being and half beast. And to have him chained to Zarkov, and Zarkov is the man of reason who can figure things out and everything, and he tames the Lion Man, and it's that kind of dynamic in the relationship. In the original Flash Gordon, they have the mudmen who live underground, and just go through and how do you shoot that? I mean, we couldn't use that.
I first became involved in Flash Gordon when Bernie Williams, the line producer, called me up to go in and meet he and Nick at Pinewood. And I knew Nick pretty well because I'd recently done 2 or 3 films with him where he was the second unit director. I did a film called Judith in Israel. And then a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum we made in Madrid, which was just after Nick had left the David Lean movie, Dr. Zhivago. Fernando Scarfiotti was the production designer, and he had an art department working under him. Fernando was coming up with a lot of great concept art of what the sets were going to look like, a lot of which would have involved the effects and what we did. I mean, I can remember one huge set which was like a huge Roman baths, and we were talking about running water and steam and all those sort of different things, which I think had it all come together in that at that time, it would have ended up being a really interesting movie. I suppose that a good description of how Nick wanted to do it was, I said to him one day, Ming's spaceship, you know, how do you see that? What do you want to see? And he thought for a moment and he said, well, I see it as a heaving mucus-covered placenta, which struck me as a little odd. And I sort of left that one die for a while. I thought we'd just wait and see what else came out the woodwork. But that was one of the favourite memories for me. We were really working out how we were going to do everything, how we were going to do the spaceships and the fighting, what the weapons were going to look like. And we were trying to use conventional weapons and put a Flash Gordon type spin on them. We were preparing things and showing Nick, getting him down, just to try and steer things into the direction that we felt he wanted to go, and give us a clear sort of pattern of work so that we could work out exactly what we had to do. But we limped along for about 3 months, and then suddenly we heard that they were stopping the film to reconsider its direction.
We didn't even know it was going to continue. We thought the whole thing that was on the day that we were all told. I think we were delivered letters, little, you know. There weren't that many of us, you know. It wasn't a huge thing, and we were just told that we were no longer required. And then first of all you think it's just you, and then you think, well, hang on, and then you realise Nick's gone too, and we thought the whole thing had folded, but obviously it hadn't.
I did 4 drafts with Nick over a year, and then he left, and I stayed on. Nick, it was heartbreaking because I didn't know. Also, I didn't know how the story was about to change with a new director, and it was kind of my project now, you know. And Nick had, you know, maybe he didn't mean it, but he says, stay on and take care of our baby.
Bernie rang me to say that the film was back on again with Mike. I didn't know, I'd never worked with Mike Hodges, but then he said Dino wanted to send an effects man that he'd used on King Kong, an American effects man called Glenn Robinson, over to overall supervise the effects on the picture. And my reaction at the time was, well, the last thing you need is 2 supervisors, and I don't work under other supervisors, so I'll step back and get somebody else, and that was it as far as I was concerned.
Mike Hodges was a real curious choice, but I think it was a practicality, you know. I didn't know what was secretly in the works, because all I saw was when we got to Twickenham, Dino threw this incredible press banquet in a soundstage with the storyboard, images from my script as big as a movie screen, lining the walls of. And I walked in, and there was I was never so honored in my life. Dino introduced me and said, "This is Michael. He is Flash Gordon." I couldn't believe it. We had lunch. There was a huge banquet. Somebody sits down next to. He says, "No, that's Michael's seat." Wouldn't let me go all day long. And I'm thinking, what? So finally, we get back to where he's rented in Curzon Street. He had an apartment. Closes the door and he says, "I don't want you to work with Mike Hodges on the script. I don't like his vision. I don't, he's too little. He's a good director, but no story." So I said, "Okay, I'll have to tell him. He says, "You say whatever you want, but I'll tell him." And then he says, "And I want you to work with Lorenzo Semple." I said, "Not yet. Let me finish this." I was working on polishing all of this. It was still, I was writing on airplanes. I was so conversant with the story and dialogue, and I would write scenes on napkins, in Pan Am. That's how long ago it was, Pan Am. And he said, "Okay, all right, finish this draft, and then you and Lorenzo," because I did not want to work with Lorenzo Semple. Lorenzo Semple is a cartoon expert. His TV Batman was just camp kitsch, which is what Flash Gordon became, a camp kitsch cultural icon. But it's still not the Bible that Nick and I wanted to do, right? It was like they made a cartoon of the Bible. And that was always my heartbreak. Aside from losing Nick. Nick was the first, that was so painful, but the way the movie turned out was, I got my name on it, but it's not I
thought it was a lot more, can I say, comic-y than the one we were entertaining or the one we were looking at making. And, it's probably why, it became a bit of a cult movie. It's still an interesting movie to watch. And I think, with Nick, he just moved on to the next project.
For me, it became an act of cowardice because it became a camp kitsch joke over the children's heads. Adults winking at each other about how funny and cute this is, when the real point of it all is kids learn their morality from comic books, right and wrong, who's good, who's bad, and how good has to triumph over evil, and it's not to be winked at over their heads, and that's the way I always felt about what happened with Flash Gordon. It has to be a spectacle. My God, it's beautiful colors, though. I mean, oh my God. But that's because Dino's favorite color was red. He wanted everything red. And if I can share this with you, because Nick means so much to me. In the movie Titanic, there's this scene where she takes the jewel off of her neck and drops it back in the ocean. Well, one night Nick never called me. I always called him. One night I'm living in New York, and it's the middle of the night. It's got to be, I don't know how late it is in London, and it's Nick. And he says, "Have you seen the Titanic movie?" And I said, "No." He says, "Oh, there's something in there they stole from us, and ours is so much better, because our favorite thing from our Flash Gordon is a scene where Zarkov and Dale Arden are confronted by Ming the Merciless. He goes to Dale, and Dale is crying. And Ming pulls out this needle and puts it up to her eye and threatens her with it. But it's really just a needle to catch her tear. And then he performs his magic science with, he's got this like a cannon that shoots a laser and ignites this little tear into a sun. And then he puts it around her neck as a jewel. Zarkov goes crazy. That's fusion. We could use seawater and power the whole planet. And Ming says this. This will give you a flavor of what we wanted. Ming says, "You speak so grandly of Earth's oceans. See what I do with a single tear." And that's what Nick was talking about. We always shared that tear with that, you know. And then Nick and I, because it was so painful, Nick and I we were not in contact for many, many years. And then later on, we got back together. We worked on several projects. I was commuting to London again, and in fact, I moved to Spain to be close to Nick, and we did, I think, five more projects, and we never discussed Flash Gordon. It never came up.